Earth might have hidden moons orbiting the planet right now. Not giant rocky moons like the one we see every night, but enormous invisible structures trapped by gravity itself. But if these ghost moons are real, then why can't we see them? For more than 60 years, scientists have argued over mysterious objects hiding near Earth that seem to appear, disappear, and sometimes become almost impossible to detect. At first, this sounds like some internet conspiracy theory. I thought the exact same thing. But then I started reading the actual research, and it turns out astronomers may have discovered gigantic clouds of dust trapped inside strange gravitational zones around the Earth-Moon system. Structures so faint and difficult to detect that many scientists believed they didn't exist at all. But recently, new evidence may have changed everything, because if these ghost moons are real, then Earth's orbit may be far stranger than we ever imagined. The strange part about this story is that it didn't begin at the edge of the universe. It began surprisingly close to home. In 1961, a Polish astronomer named Kordylewski was studying the gravitational relationship between Earth and the Moon when he noticed something unusual. There appeared to be enormous concentrations of dust sitting in fixed positions near Earth, not orbiting randomly through space like debris, but gathering in specific regions as if something invisible was holding them there. At first glance, the discovery sounded almost ridiculous. These weren't solid moons with craters or rocky surfaces. They were diffuse clouds of microscopic dust particles spread across massive regions of space. But despite being incredibly faint, the structures themselves were enormous. Some estimates suggested they could stretch nearly 9 times wider than Earth. The problem was that almost nobody could consistently see them. Sometimes astronomers detected faint traces. Other times, the clouds seemed completely absent. Unlike planets or stars, they had no bright surface reflecting sunlight toward telescopes. The particles were so sparse and dim that they blended into the background glow of space itself. And because observations kept failing, the entire idea slowly drifted into scientific controversy. For decades, many researchers suspected Kordylewski had simply made a mistake. But the mystery refused to disappear completely because the locations where these supposedly existed turned out to be very real and very strange places in space, places where gravity behaves differently. To understand ghost moons, you first need to understand something called Lagrange points, and despite the complicated name, the concept is actually pretty simple. Whenever massive objects move through space, their gravity constantly pulls on nearby material. Normally, that creates unstable motion. Objects drift, spiral away, or crash into something else. But in a few rare locations, gravity and orbital motion balance almost perfectly. Imagine 2 enormous forces pulling against each other while an object moves at just the right speed to remain suspended between them. Instead of falling away, it becomes trapped in a stable gravitational pocket. That's essentially what a Lagrange point is. The Earth-Moon system has 5 of these regions, but 2 of them became extremely important to this story, L4 and L5. These points sit ahead of and behind the Moon in its orbit, forming gravitational safe zones where dust and debris can accumulate over time. And according to Kordylewski, that's exactly where the ghost moons were hiding. The idea sounded bizarre, but the physics actually made sense. If enough dust drifted into these stable regions, gravity could temporarily trap it there. Over time, massive clouds might slowly form without ever becoming solid objects like normal moons. But there was still one major problem. If these structures were truly that large, why were they so difficult to confirm? That question haunted astronomers for more than half a century because every failed observation weakened the theory, and eventually even scientists who wanted the clouds to be real started doubting them. Astronomy depends heavily on repeatability. If one scientist discovers something, others should be able to observe it too. That's how discoveries become accepted fact instead of speculation. But ghost moons behaved differently. Some observations appeared promising, others showed absolutely nothing. The clouds seemed to change shape, fade, disperse, and occasionally disappear entirely. And honestly, this is the point where the whole story starts sounding unreliable, because astronomy has a long history of false discoveries caused by telescope errors, image distortions, atmospheric interference, or simple misinterpretation. So for decades, ghost moons sat in this uncomfortable gray area between theory and illusion. But eventually, researchers realized something important. The clouds themselves might not actually be stable. Solar radiation constantly pushes tiny dust particles through space. Solar wind disturbs them. Gravity from the sun alters their motion, and even slight orbital changes can reshape the entire structure over time, which means the ghost moons may not behave like permanent objects at all. They may behave more like weather systems, huge drifting clouds continuously forming and dispersing inside invisible gravitational currents around Earth. And suddenly, the inconsistent observations started making more sense. Scientists weren't necessarily looking for a fixed moon. They were trying to detect a constantly shifting structure made of dust particles scattered across enormous distances. That realization changed the search entirely, because instead of looking directly for the clouds themselves, astronomers began looking for something else: the way light interacted with the dust. In 2018, a Hungarian research team revisited the mystery using a much more specialized imaging technique. Instead of trying to directly photograph the clouds, they searched for polarized light scattered by dust particles suspended near the Earth-Moon system. This mattered because dust affects light in very specific ways. Even when individual particles are nearly invisible, scattered sunlight can still leave measurable patterns behind. By filtering out background interference and isolating those patterns, researchers hoped they could detect evidence of the clouds indirectly. And eventually, they did. The team captured polarized signatures matching the predicted location of the Kordylewski clouds near the L5 Lagrange point. After nearly 60 years of debate, scientists finally had some of the strongest evidence ever collected that ghost moons were real. Not hidden alien structures, not secret planets, but enormous dust formations trapped by gravity itself. And yet, even then, the controversy didn't fully disappear, because astronomy is cautious for good reason. Some scientists still argue the evidence isn't definitive enough to completely settle the debate. Others believe the clouds may only exist temporarily depending on solar conditions and orbital disturbances. But honestly, that uncertainty is what makes the story fascinating. Because we're not talking about some mystery near a distant galaxy. We're talking about giant structures potentially existing right beside Earth, while remaining almost invisible to us for generations. And once you realize that, another question immediately appears. If Earth can hide structures like this, what else is sharing our orbit? It turns out ghost moons aren't the only strange objects surrounding Earth. Over the last few decades, astronomers have discovered that our planet shares space with quasi-moons, temporary mini-moons, and asteroids moving in complex gravitational relationships with Earth. And some of them sound almost fictional. Quasi-moons, for example, aren't true moons at all. They're asteroids orbiting the Sun on paths extremely similar to Earth's orbit. Because they move in near synchronization with our planet, they can appear from certain perspectives to loop around Earth like satellites. But they're not actually bound to Earth in the same way our moon is. It's basically a gravitational illusion created by orbital motion. Then there are mini-moons. These are small objects temporarily captured by Earth's gravity before eventually escaping back into space. Most are tiny and difficult to detect, and some suspected mini-moons later turned out to be human-made space debris. The important thing is that Earth's orbital environment is far more crowded and dynamic than most people realize. Objects constantly drift in and out of gravitational relationships with our planet. Dust accumulates in stable pockets, asteroids temporarily synchronize with Earth's orbit, tiny captured objects appear for months before vanishing again. And suddenly, the idea of invisible companions no longer sounds impossible. It sounds expected. In fact, scientists are becoming increasingly interested in these regions for future space missions. Stable gravitational zones like Lagrange points could eventually serve as ideal locations for observatories, communication stations, or deep space staging platforms. The James Webb Telescope already operates near one of these gravitational balance points. So the same strange regions that may hide ghost moons could also become some of the most important locations for humanity's future in space. Which creates a strange contrast. For decades, these areas sounded almost mythical. Now, they may become strategically essential. I think what makes the ghost moon story so unsettling is how ordinary it begins. It's not about black holes or distant galaxies or some object hidden at the edge of the observable universe.
It's about the space surrounding Earth, a region humans have studied for centuries.
And yet, even here, scientists may have overlooked enormous structures hiding in plain sight simply because they were too faint, too diffused, and too difficult to detect consistently. That changes the way you think about discovery, because we tend to imagine scientific mysteries existing somewhere far away, waiting at the edge of exploration. But sometimes the universe hides things much closer than we expect, not because they're unreachable, because they're hard to notice. And honestly, there's something strangely beautiful about that. Right now, while Earth moves silently around the sun, giant clouds of dust may be drifting beside us inside invisible gravitational traps created by the Earth-Moon system itself, appearing, dispersing, reforming again, quietly existing in the darkness while most of humanity has no idea they're even there.